With these challenges, it may be difficult to overcome them using a utilitarian argument. So we're going to try something a little different. So with utilitarian and consequentialist arguments, they focus on the consequences of an act to determine if the act is ethical. So instead, we're going to take a look at what are called deontological arguments. And these focus on the duties of the person acting and the way the act impinges on the rights of others. In fact, the word deontology is from the Greek, and it means the study of duty and obligation. And perhaps the most famous deontologist was the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. Now, Kant wrestled eloquently about what duties we humans have to each other. So he came up with what are called categorical imperatives. And these characterize these duties. And his second categorical imperative goes something along the lines of, never treat a fellow human merely as a means to an end. So in other words, think of it as saying that every human deserves respect. So I mean, really, it's more about your mental attitude towards the other person. Do you see this person as an actual person or just as a means to an end? So this approach encourages us to consider the intent behind the action and not just the results of the action. Let's try out a deontological perspective on our question about hacking. Is the act of hacking into another person's computer system inherently unethical? Well, if we take some hackers at their word, their intent is not to harm the public. They characterize themselves as a foil against corporate and government abuse. And they characterize hacking as a form of investigative reporting, similar to the leaking of the Pentagon Papers. They also claim that they want to help people discover security holes to protect against malevolent hackers. So let's just assume that hackers who break into other people's computers for personal gain are doing something unethical by any of the three arguments we've seen so far in this section. So whether it's through using the analogy, the utilitarian, or deontological arguments. So for the rest of this, we'll concentrate on the hackers who claim a benign, if not malevolent, intent to their computer break-ins. Let's assume that good hackers are telling the truth when they claim to mean no harm to the public. So let's explore how hackers describe the goodness of what they do. Now, there are components to what are called the hacker ethic, and we're going to focus on two of these components. So one of them states that all information should be free. The idea is that information sharing is a powerful, positive good because it's not possible to make good decisions if important information is hidden. So it is the ethical duty of hackers to facilitate access to information wherever possible. The other component is mistrust authority or promoting decentralization. So the rules and hierarchical management structures that characterize government and corporate bureaucracies mostly serve to prevent people from getting things done rather than solving these problems. So each hacker should act individually or in very small groups to do what he or she thinks is best and ignore the rules. These claims are nice and all, but we're going to take a look at some of the weaknesses with it. So the first claim, the idea of sharing information looks pretty good at first, but it seems a little less noble when you remember that this information that hackers share isn't their information to begin with. It belongs to someone else. So I mean, it's one thing to share open source computer code or the works of like some literature that's publicly available, but here we're talking about sharing material that's whose copyright is legally still in force, or sharing classified information that might impact national security. So there's some issues here. For example, in the case of WikiLeaks releasing government documents, they actually collaborated with big newspapers to help determine which cables were safe to release and which ones they could not really release. So some groups that release leaked documents just simply release all the documents without doing any such filtering. So I mean, stealing this information just does not respect other people's wishes or their own personal safety. Now, what about the second argument? Well, I mean, that claim also has some similar weaknesses. I mean, hackers might argue that the rules for protecting electronic privacy are incorrect and they can be violated. They may argue that these rules exist because we expect electronic privacy, but it is our expectation of electronic privacy that is the problem, not their violation of that expectation. So what's missing from their argument is, why are their ideas about information, the fact that all information should be free, why should those ideas take priority over the majority view, where most people say some information should be private? And that should form the basis of the rules. So why do the hackers' ideas take a higher priority over what everyone else says? That's a good question. Um, ethically, there's no problem with thinking and arguing about all information should be free or to be suspicious of rules, but there is a big problem when you act on that belief in a way that treats people as a means to an end. So what we see here is, we're probably not going to convince most hackers about some of the remaining questions about this issue, but there does seem to be some issues about these actual claims.